Good morning, exporters, and welcome to our Successful Trade Shows in the Middle East webinar. This is in preparation for the Arab Health and Dubai Boat Show. We're really excited to be here today and have an action-packed webinar with hopefully lots of useful information for you as you prepare these very large, very important trade shows today. So we're going to get started right away. But before we do, we have a little tiny bit of housekeeping just to go through. This is part of a series of webinars, which we've been doing now for about 4 years, to help exporters grow their business, grow their brands, grow their sales internationally. We expect this webinar to be about 50 minutes long. During the webinar, we will have 3 polls. We will ask you to participate in those polls by clicking on the answers that most relevant to you. We do have a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, and we would really encourage you to put any questions you have in there. Just put the questions in. We'll curate the questions at the end. If we don't have time for all questions, we'll get back to you at the end. We have a recording of this webinar, and we will be sending you a link to that recording and the slide deck at the end of this week. So that means you can sit back, enjoy the webinar, and listen to some great experts, which it's my pleasure to introduce to you now. On your left, you have Edwin. Edwin Johnson is an experienced trade show consultant. He's based out in Houston, Texas, and he manages the USA exhibitor participation for international trade events. He is a director of business development at a company called Classic Global, and their mission is to help U.S. exhibitors participate in foreign trade shows. They really focus on the UAE, on Africa, and the UK. And Edwin's had experience in managing trade shows for about 8 years now. He also has a lot of first-hand experience and knowledge about doing business in the UAE. He lived in Dubai for over 4 years before moving back to the States and Texas more recently. And on the right on your screen is Mike Schiffauer. Vice President, International Trade and Field Operations at Enterprise Florida. Mike is a well-seasoned and experienced trade development operator and is really a key driver of some of the success that Florida has had in the healthcare industry and amazing success and terrific success they've had in Arab Health. So, and myself, I'm in the middle. My name is Susanna Hardy, and I'm the Chief Content Officer for IBT Online. IBT Online is a private company. We're a US company, although we have offices in Europe as well, particularly in France, Germany, and the UK. And our mission is really to help small, mid-sized companies use online tools to grow their exports. So we build and manage corporate websites for exporters. So with all that, what we're going to be talking about today, here's our agenda. Our agenda today, we're going to be talking about international trade shows, just a brief sort of overview, then drill down into Arab Health and the Dubai Boat Show, talking about online tools for trade shows, that's localized websites and social media platforms, and just a brief outline of some of the strategies we've seen successful for international trade show participants. So let's get started on international trade shows, just a sort of an overview to start with here. International trade shows, there are an awful lot of them. That's, I think, one thing we can say. They are absolutely key for international trade in goods and services. They're the trade shows cover everything from special exhibitions for just about every sector possibly, to universal exhibitions, and according to data from the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, known as UFI, there are around 1,200 exhibition venues in the world and 31,000 exhibitions in the world. There's an absolutely gigantic combined hall space, 35 million square meters. That's equivalent, I worked it out, to 460 football fields. So 460 football fields worth of space to talk and meet business network places. There's about 4.5 million exhibitors globally every year, 260 million visitors. So it is a vast industry. I've listed on the left some of the sources of some of the main exhibition databases that are worthwhile going through. I mean, for example, eventsi.com, they have over 21,000 listed exhibitions that they monitor and that you can look at. So it's a good place to look for trade shows. One of the key things that I think one wants to highlight right from the start is to beware of size. These places can be enormous, so you really need to get your rollerblades on. Some of them are simply enormous. The largest, I think, is the CES, the computer show in Las Vegas, but I think the Canton Fair in China is also huge. That has about a 1.2 million square meters of floor space. So that's enormous. So don't underestimate the size of these things. I think both Edwin and Mike will have something to say about that when they talk about their trade shows. We're often asked about costs. This is really, I mean, how long is a piece of thread? Costs really depend on you, on your company, on the trade show chosen, on what you're looking at. But as a rule of thumb, we say cost is about 3 times your space. And that's given by several. That's what's best practice is given by the association UFI, also by I think U.S. Commercial Services talk about a similar cost sort of rule of thumb if you're looking for budget controls. So we just wanted to list very quickly some of your main checklists, and again, this is something that you're going to hear a couple of times throughout this presentation. Your checklist, your goals, your do's and don'ts in these, and it's a very well-trodden path. It's about researching the right trade show, researching the right format for that, booking early, make sure you've got great goals that are realistic, measuring the goals, make sure that you're really communicating when you're there, before, during, and after the trade show, and having fantastic media strategies for that. So with that, I just want to send now our first poll. That's just a really very brief introduction, just a quick overview. And I just want to launch a quick poll. And this is a poll just to ask you all if you're actually attending the Arab Health or the Dubai Boat Show. And I would ask you to take your polls and just click on whichever ones are most relevant to you. Right now, we've got about 50-50 Dubai and Arab Health, and there's a slight favorite. It's actually more like 60-40 Arab Health Dubai at the moment, and I guess that's a terrific response to right now. Thank you. And with that, let's move on. And I will now pass the mic over to Michael, and at the Arab Health and Dubai show. And first of all, to Michael. Michael?
Okay, thank you, Susan. Let's see. I'd like to just go ahead and more or less explain who Enterprise Florida is. We're a private-public partnership in the state of Florida. We represent the state of Florida as the official economic development organization and trade agency. We primarily work with in 2 ways. We have a business development unit which works to assist companies to set up operations in Florida. And then secondly, we have a trade unit which is responsible for working with the industry to help them sell their products and services abroad. Initially, you'll see here in the slide, our homepage, which talks a little bit about some of the various sectors. I mean, Florida's known now as number 2 in the United States for the concentration of medical device manufacturers, and number 3 for the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. Next slide. We do roughly, the organization, about 30 international trade shows and trade missions abroad. And one of the second biggest medical show we do is Arab Health. The 3 big ones are Medica, which is number 1, and then number 2 And tied for number 2 is Arab Health, which is for the Middle East region, the GCC, located in Dubai. And then we also do Hospitalar, which is the medical show for Latin America. Roughly, both of those are similar in size, and both in the number of attendees and the number of exhibitors, and both cover vast regions of the world in their specific areas. Arab Health has really grown. It's outstanding, the growth we've seen over the years. I mean, I've been exhibiting at Arab Health now, I guess, for about 13 years, and the growth is just unparalleled. It's also too what I hear a lot of companies mention to me is it's not just working with the existing distributors and dealers that they have. It's a lot of generating of new business. So it's a lot of the exhibitors that are going there are generating new business. It's a little more expensive than any other show in the world, but when you look at the retention level, that's the number of companies coming back every year, and the new companies coming in. It's really, there's nothing quite like it as far as the medical shows that you'll see around the world. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about why exhibit in trade fairs, and we're going to go through this very quickly. Initially, most companies want to exhibit because they want to get on on-the-spot sales. Typically, you don't really get contracts when you first exhibit in a show. You generate new business leads, which then have to be cultivated and developed over a period of time. But ultimately, if you are an existing exhibitor that do the show year in, year out, there is some contracts that are consummated at the show, and I think that's very attractive to companies to see that develop. When you look at the difference between U.S. shows and international shows, really the big difference is that in the U.S. they're more geared towards branding and market positioning, and some new product release, less on procurement. When you look at the international shows, it's all of the above, but you have a higher degree of procurement. Roughly about 50% of the procurement overseas is done at trade shows, so that makes them quite outstanding. Second is you can test a market out. You can find out how your product's being viewed in various markets that are drawing attendees to that event. You can also assess competition, and you make business contacts. Next slide. So deciding on the trade fair, this is important because typically you don't necessarily want to just throw things on the wall and see what sticks. You really need to have a plan to decide whether it's best for you. I mean, are you going to have a good ROI from the event? How do you create that? How do you evaluate the ROI from exhibiting at events? I can talk to you a little bit about that as well. But initially, what you want to do is you want to look at how big of an area is covered. I mean, is it a global show? Is it a regional show? Is it a niche country show? So you need to kind of look at the overall attendance patterns. What kind of products are being range of products are being exhibited at the show? Is it going to be compatible or specific to your product area? That's a must. How many visitors attended last year? And that's important to sort of look at the trends. I mean, is the trends going upward? Are they going downward? Or are they flat? So I typically like to look at not just the last year's attendance, but I like to look at the last several years back. That gives you some attendance, kind of guidelines or trends that you can take a look at. Also, what countries is being pulled to that show? I mean, is it the countries that you're targeting? Is it the right mix? So that's important. What is the cost? And you need to evaluate the cost. I mean, Susan broke it down for you, and but I think that's critical in knowing what the cost is, and it's not just the booth and the travel. There's more that goes into the cost, and you need to be aware of that. Also, what services are included. And this is something whereby either you get a turnkey booth or you get an independent space where you do it all. You'll have to determine what services are going to be provided, and just make sure that you don't miss anything. I mean, companies have oftentimes purchased the independent space, and then forgot to add the electrical. And if they have equipment that requires electrical, that's a big problem because it can't always be turned on, and ordered and implemented once the pavilion is or the booth space is actually created. So that is really important to have a good checklist to decide exactly what you're going to need in as far as services for that show. And then what's the deadline to participate, to reserve your space? I mean, most of these shows now are selling out. The better shows are selling out almost 8 months in advance. I don't think a lot of these good shows you can get space in a month, 2 months before the event occurs. It's rare. I can tell you right now, Arab Health sells out about 8 months. For us, 8 to 10 months before the show, so it sells out very early. You see also a high retention rate, sometimes 100% retention rate. So that's a good problem, and but it's a problem to have because for organizers like Enterprise Florida that are needing to purchase space and then creating Florida pavilions or state pavilions, you need to have as much space as you can to try to bring in as many companies as you feasibly can. And so ultimately, you certainly want to try to reserve your space as early as possible. And actually, the way it works with a lot of these organizers is they rate you. They rate you on how fast you get your reservation in, that you get points for that. What kind of branding of a company are you? I mean, are you going to be bringing business to the show? They rate you on that. And they rate you on how many years you've been doing the show. So typically, if you've done the show for more than 1 or 2 years, you get points for that, and that becomes important later on and I'll discuss that as far as location within the show. Next slide. Next steps, I always say it's very similar to real estate: location, location, location. And you can see in the picture here, you certainly don't want to be out in the sticks. You certainly need to make sure you get good placement, good traffic areas, preferably somewhere around the area of either competitors that you want to deadhead against, or in your industry sector as a draw. And oftentimes when you do these shows, if you don't, when you're new, you don't have the seniority, so you sort of start out in left field and you kind of work your way up to the primary areas. Sometimes you get lucky and you get the location, but location is critical in any trade show that you're planning to do. Oftentimes companies will say, what's the difference between a U.S. pavilion versus a state pavilion versus independent space? Well, it's aside from the cost, I mean, it's cheaper to get independent space versus state or U.S. pavilion space. But the thing is, when you get independent space, you buy usually a larger piece of raw floor space, and then you've got to build your pavilion. You've got to build your booths and add your services and so on. You got to promote and make sure you draw business to your location, which in some cases, when companies outgrow a U.S. pavilion or a state pavilion, they naturally go into independent space, but they already have a good core group of dealers and distributors that know them and will follow them wherever they are in the show, so they can get away with that. But when you're usually starting out, U.S. pavilion or state pavilion is really the best because they're turnkey booths. Everything's done for them. They're actively promoted. They're supported by either U.S. Department of Commerce or the state commerce organizations and agencies. So you get a bigger bang per dollar, but a little bit more expensive than going independent, where you have to do more of it yourself. Then I think once you've decided which way you're going to go, sign that contract, put your deposit down, start working on your hotel and travel arrangements, especially your hotel, because oftentimes with a lot of these shows, it's very hard to get good locations. I mean, affordable hotel accommodations. That's certainly an issue with Medica and Dusseldorf. I mean, they typically a lot of people book their hotels right after the show ends for the next year. So I tend to think, look at these your hotel arrangements, your travel arrangements. Don't put those things off too much to the end. The air you can work a little bit with. You can push down a little bit further into the year, but the hotel was one you don't want to put off too much. Selecting a freight forwarder, making sure you get your product there is really important. Make sure you got a reputable freight forwarder. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people try to go cheap and use some freight forwarder that has quoted them, that has no contacts or no ability to to work these shows and clear customs and get their booth to their freight to their booth. And there's nothing worse than seeing a company sitting in their booth with with their freight not arriving, and they have no equipment to display or demo. They have no graphics, no brochures, nothing. It's just heartbreaking to see that. So whatever you do, do not go cheap on selecting the freight forwarder. Make sure whoever you use is a reputable freight forwarder that is authorized to do business at that show and can get the freight to your booth in time. Then you want to certainly develop a promotional campaign. There'll be more talk about this later. Identifying your prospects. I tend to think that you don't really want to go into these shows cold turkey. If you can avoid it, you really need to have either peppered the region with some dealer distributors already, at least some, or you want to certainly have some meetings with some dealers and distributors there at the show. And then, of course, any of the walk-ups that pop up are just icing on the cake. So you definitely need to put time and effort into the advanced planning to really get more out of the show. The old saying, what you put into it, you get out of it, is true with trade shows. Advertising, press releases, getting press boxes, social media, banner ads, all of these things are critical in trying to get more business to your booth and to generate more business for your company. Planning your exhibit and your layout and your design is really important. Color, lighting, function, flow. I've got a couple slides I'd like to show you some good recommendations, some poor recommendations. Next slide. This is a slide that shows you a concept where overall it looks good as far as booth design. They've put a big pop-up in here with some banners. But one of the things the coloring's not too bad, but the thing is, depending on the type of industry that they're dealing with, coloring can make a difference. Also, lighting. Light draws people to your booth. You don't want to have it so hot that you're sweating, but you certainly need to make sure your booth is lit adequately. You need to make sure that the colors are attractive. And at the same time, in this picture, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of text. And in some cases, when you only have 4 to 5 seconds to capture an attendee walking by your booth, you need to make sure that they clearly can look at your booth, look at your graphics, and understand who you are and what you're there for, so that they can be drawn into your booth so you can speak with them. Probably too much text in here. They could do a little bit more with changing that out with some pictures that give them a little better feel for the fact that they're a nanotechnology in the healthcare world. So I think that's probably too much wording, too much text there. Next slide. Here's an example of one that's a little better. They have a little bit more open design. It's telling you who they are and what they do. Security cameras, security lighting, and so on. So ultimately, pictures of some of the product, the coloring kind of pops. So you do need to kind of think about lighting, color, design, function. I've seen some really put too much clutter in there where it's very difficult to even get into the booth to even talk to somebody, so they just walk by. Next slide. Yeah, ultimately, one thing I would say too is make sure that when you're developing your messaging, make sure that if you're there to generate new business, state that. I mean, I've seen some companies say I'm looking for new distributors, I'm looking for new sales representatives. Certainly put that out there, but make sure that visually people understand what you do, and you're branding what you do and why you're there, and make it attractive. Certainly with your staffing. Plan to have adequate staffing and make sure they're trained. I can't tell you how many times I've seen new companies send staff and they've just sat in the back of their booth and looking at their phones or working on their laptops, and just a sea of humanity is walking by, and never once do they really engage anybody. And I've seen oftentimes people standing in the back of the booth with just their arms crossed, with a frown on their face. It's not very inviting. You certainly need to have a sales team that likes people and would like to engage with potential buyers and dealers that may be walking by. So make sure that the staff is trained and that you have adequate staff coverage. There's nothing worse than walking by a booth, and if you have an interest in doing business with that company, there's nobody in the booth there to talk to. So definitely that needs to be thought through. Supplies and materials, giveaways. Giveaways, you don't see giveaways as much as you once did years ago. I don't think that's really as relevant. I mean, some companies maybe if you're, it might be more specific to the sector that you're in, that where there is giveaways. But I can tell you that in the medical industry, you don't see a lot of giveaways anymore, or in the ICT side of things. But you do need to make sure you have adequate supplies and materials so that you can function properly while you're at the show. Because oftentimes at these events, there's really no hardware store, or there's no additional office supply store to print more cards or brochures. So make sure that you have everything you need there on the spot. Don't necessarily think that you're going to be able to get it, especially when you get into some of these other smaller niche shows, because there just isn't that kind of support nearby. Definitely recheck your travel arrangements. Make sure you get some photos. It's important to get photos of your booth, especially if you plan to do more shows, to sort of see what you can do to improve in the future. Check hospitality arrangements. If you plan to do any receptions or do any dinner meetings or training meetings, make sure you have access to meeting rooms and so on, either in the fairground areas or in the hotels that you're staying at or nearby. This needs to be planned in advance, because typically if you're trying to get training rooms or meeting rooms to have all your buyers and dealers get together, and you try to plan that a month out, it's going to be very difficult to do that. Email campaign prospecting to email campaigns is very important to get reach out in some form or fashion to bring in new business to your show, to your booth. Next slide. Definitely additional next steps. I definitely would say do not discount the press. There's a tremendous press corps at a lot of these events. Mostly they're industry pubs, and they do a lot of editorials, and so reaching out to have some meetings with some of these pubs to have them take a look at your product, especially if you're new. I would say that typically when I go to these shows, I hear from the dealers and distributors, what's new? Who do you have that's new? What kind of new products are here? They're always seeking out what's new. Matter of fact, in some of these shows, you hear that a lot of dealers and distributors are not going every year, but they're going every other year because they don't think there's enough new product, enough new technology or companies at the show, so they're going every other year. So I would definitely say that if you're new to the show, capitalize on your newness. If you have new products, definitely capitalize on that, put it front and center, because that's what's drawing a lot of these buyers and dealers and distributors to these shows to start with. Press campaigns are very helpful, because that can, working with the editorials to talk about your new products is important, and it gets you a lot of free publicity. There's a lot of multipliers, trade organizations, industry associations, U.S. Department of Commerce, State Department of Commerce's, private organizations that you can partner with to get the word out about your business. Co-brand wherever possible with other entities, if you can find that can be helpful in bringing in more traffic to you. I mean, partnering with the hospital, Texas Children's, or Cleveland Clinic in some cases can be a real draw. So co-branding can be very helpful. I will tell you that Wi-Fi and communication connectivity is paramount to every company in these shows, and it's spotty sometimes at best. And so I would definitely spend some time trying to figure out about how you're going to use Wi-Fi, how you're going to connect, and making sure you have some kind of redundant system. I mean, if in doubt, always drop a DSL line into your booth. It's the only dedicated way of getting internet access, because once these shows get very crowded, the cell connectivity disappears, email connectivity disappears, and you just need to have, if it's vital for your company to have connectivity in your booth, you need to have a plan and a backup plan to make sure it works. We talked a little bit about reception and dinners, planning ahead, making sure you have adequate locations reserved so that you can carry those off. Next slide. And then just, at the show, work, 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 work. I mean, I would recommend you just don't sit down. If you're there for 4 days, it's not a holiday. It's designed for you to be busy and productive and successful. I generally don't like to see anybody sitting down too much, or sitting down the entire show. It just shows a real lack of energy, and it turns off a lot of people that just walk by because they don't want to bother you. So I would tend to say just work, work, work. You can certainly relax on the plane or pass out on the plane going home, from the success that you've drawn from working the show as hard as you did. Manage your daily meetings. Don't Make sure that you can schedule them properly, and don't overcommit. Make sure you have enough staff to cover it. Make sure you talk to staff, daily, as far as the meetings you have, your plan for the day, and at the beginning of the show. And then I always say smile and engage. Always stay busy. There's nothing more than a smile to just kind of bring people in to start dialogue, to hear, get conversation rolling. Enjoy the time that you're there. It's work, yes, it is. You're going to be spending a lot of time. It's long hours. It's on your feet a lot. But at the same time, make the best of it. Try to get as much out of it. You've put all that energy into it. Make sure you come out of it successful. Check out the competitors when you get a chance. And at the same time, like I say, meet as many people as you can, everybody you can, because those connections, you don't know where they could lead you. It could be the next biggest business deal or the next biggest acquisition for your company. Max it out. And then certainly survey the entire fair as much as you can. Don't just stay in your one booth. Try to look at who's out there, what they're doing, what the competition's doing, new technologies, new products. Where's your industry going? Are you there? What do you need to get there? Do you need to add more telemedicine to your telemedical components to your products? Whatever the future is, make sure you're aware of it. Make sure you're moving to that direction, so that you're staying relevant. And then list creative improvements. I mean, if you decide to do it, these shows, how can we improve? Definitely, you don't sort of sit idly by and sort of think, well, what we did this year is going to work next year. I tend to think, always mix it up. Every 3 years, we try to change out designs and come up with new branding. So I would definitely say continue to stay ahead and stay relevant. Next slide. And then certainly after the show, it's just as important to make sure you follow up. Thank you letters going out. Follow up, follow up, follow up. I mean, leads die if you don't follow up after 48 hours. I mean, you need to respond. Make sure that you report your results and plan for the next year. One of the things I will just point out is that I've had companies tell me, how can I tell you how I did at this show? I mean, you want me to pull a number out of the air? And usually my answer to that is, I ask the company, okay, what are you doing? Okay, you're manufacturing EKG machines. How many different kinds of EKG machines do you produce? Well, they'd usually tell me, let's say I produce 3 different levels of EKG machines. And one sells for 5,000, one's a little more advanced, 10,000, another one sells for 20,000. So I'll say, well, what do you sell the most of? And I said, well, it's our $10,000 model. I said, what is your normal transaction? Is it one machine at a time when you sell to a distributor, or is it 2 machines? No, it's 10 machines. Okay, 10 machines. So that's a $100,000 order. And to see that's right. So then I'll ask them, how many business cards did you get here at the show? Well, they'll pull out 200 or 300 or 238 business cards. And then I'll say, well, out of those 238 business cards, how many do you think are actually really good leads? I mean, solid good leads. 1%, 0.5%. They'll say, well, maybe 10 of those are really good solid leads. So then I'll usually tell them, well, how you do your ROI here then is you take your $100,000 times those 10, and that's your ROI. That's your forecasted ROI. You hope to generate from those 10 good leads out of the 238, knowing that your average customer sales is a $10,000 unit, which you require 10 of these EKG machines to be purchased when you sell to a distributor. So that's $100,000. That's how you come up with your ROI, and that's how you can use that based on your overall cost to do an ROI to determine show to show what kind of results you're generating. And then ultimately, when you close those transactions, I mean, that's the bottom line. So, a year, if it's a year or it's 6 months down the road, when you close those numbers get retabulated in so you can keep track of that ROI to make sure that that show you're doing is giving you the kind of return on investment that you want. So I hope that's helpful. Next slide. Okay, well, that's it for me. I will now conclude my presentation and turn it back over to you, Susan.
Mike, thank you so much. You can really tell the experience that you had, the depth of knowledge in these international trade shows. I particularly appreciated the ROI discussion at the end. I have to say that's something that comes up a lot. I want to give the mic over to Edwin now to talk about the Dubai Boat Show. We're tight on time, but I know that Edwin has prepared some great slides as well. So Edwin, are you there?
Hi, thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. My name is Edwin Johnson. Today, I'm going to talk about the Dubai Boat Show. As you can see, the boat show is scheduled to happen from the 26th of Feb to the 2nd of March. And it's going to take place in Dubai Canal, which is by Jumeirah. And this year, the timing is very different from what we usually see in US. Over in Dubai, the boat show starts at 3 o'clock in the evening and goes till 10 o'clock at night. Next slide. Before going into details of the boat show, I would like to talk a little bit about my company. We are an international trade show consultant and exhibition service company. We are based out in Houston, Texas. We offer our services to both organizers as well as US exhibitors wanting to exhibit in our trade shows. We help US exhibitors in a lot of ways to promote their products, to promote them being at the trade show, and we do that by helping them get funding from state departments, helping them connect with US commercial offices in the local market and trade associations to help them navigate through the new market, as well as find the right contacts when they are at one of our events. Currently, we represent different trade shows in different industry sectors across Middle East, UK, and Africa, and below are a few of the portfolios that we manage from our side. Next slide. Now, I would like to talk about the market dynamics. Why now? Why UAE? Why GCC when it comes to boating sector? Business, as you all know, Dubai is a financial hub, which means that around the value of the wealth growth in Middle East and Africa is estimated to be around 12 trillion by 2021, and the maritime sector is a key market where and a large amount of millennials and a large amount of wealthy individuals living in Middle East, they look for investing in the boating industry, buy a yacht, buy a boat, and the highest portion of millennials that are usually business owners are worth between $250,000 to $20 million. And these are the kind of people that would come to the show and who wants to invest in buying a boat or want to work with our exhibitors during the event. Next slide. Now, it's projected that the ultra wealthy individuals that are living in Dubai or in Middle East, they're estimated to grow 60% by 2026, and Dubai is home to a lot of new projects whereby they're trying to expand their maritime sector. They're trying to expand the amount of boats that are available to host the yachts and different kind of cruises that are coming to the area. Now, the few of the projects that are currently being worked on is Dubai Harbor, Dubai Marinas project, which only expands the capacity for Dubai to hold more yachts, more boats in the region, and UAE has also become one of the top 10 maritime capitals around the globe, and the total estimated value of UAE maritime sector is currently estimated to around 66 billion by the end of 2018, which is only going to grow in the coming years. I've also included some of the feedbacks that we've got from our exhibitors as well as from the visitors who attended the show. And on the next slide, I'll talk about what are the kind of visitors that you can see at the Dubai Boat Show, what kind of expenditure or what kind of amount they usually spend at our show, so you get a better idea. So the 30% of the show attendance comes from ultra high net worth individuals. We do attract a good amount of B2C as well as B2B visitors. Around 1,300 trade visitors coming from the different manufacturing plants as well as like interior designers who wants to work with our suppliers who are exhibiting at the event. And there are approximately 5,000 plus VIPs that we expect, and we do have a VIP section where and this is the area where usually high net value individuals are seen. Now, about 97% of the millennials that visited the show, they were interested in buying the boats. And when we looked at the overall picture, about 40% of the people or visitors that came to the boat had plans of investing around $500,000 plus with our exhibitors, or looking forward to purchasing new products or new boats for their experience. And overall, we get most of our visitors from different GCC countries, not just from UAE. We got visitors coming from Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, which makes it very interesting because when suppliers go to this event, they have the opportunities to see buyers and distributors from the neighboring countries, and that only expands to your sales portfolio. Next slide. Well, just to give you a background, the boat show has been running for around 26 years now. This is the 27th edition that we are hosting. We cover a lot of product sectors. We have got companies showcasing their high-end yachts, boats in the categories of 15 meters and above. We've got suppliers who showcase their luxury and lifestyle products, safety equipments, communication equipments, navigation equipments. So anything to do with the boating sector or the marina sector, we've got all sort of suppliers coming and showcasing the product line. Last year we had around 845 brands exhibiting at the event, and a good percentage of these brands, I mean, they come from US. US is a seeked out region where people come looking for American products, American based boats or yachts that are available. We also get a good attendance on different sort of water sport equipments, adventure sport equipments, fishing equipments that are being showcased at the event itself. Now, 59% of the exhibitors consider the show as a very important platform to promote their business in the GC, and 85% of the exhibitors would recommend the show to different industry colleagues. So the word of mouth goes out, and we've got new exhibitors coming to our event just because of the experience that our past exhibitors have had. We've got good retention rate, almost 90%, which means that they've had a good show. They've got good sales being part of the Dubai Boat Show itself. And we've got testimonies from a lot of our exhibitors where they said that this is worth their time and it's worth investing their time to come to Dubai Boat Show. Next slide, please. This is the show venue. As I've told before, the show is hosted in Dubai Canal by Jumeirah. We've got three sections. One is the indoor section where you can choose to exhibit, by having a small booth and, showcasing what products you have. Or else you can be in the outdoor display area where, smaller boats are being showcased in the land. And then we have the marine area where, all big yachts are being showcased. This gives a wide range of product lines that are being showcased at the event. And in the outdoor display area, we also do have a lot of food trucks and events happening to attract, more families and people to come out and have a good time at the boat show, not just, visit the show and then, do business and go back. So they usually stay around, and since it's the timing of the show is from 3 to 10, a lot of people come out after the work or come with their family, and they get an opportunity to show rest of the family, what they're looking for, if they're looking to purchase a new boat, So it's kind of like a good family experience when they come to the event itself. Now, I would also like to talk about few of the best practices as well as some general information that exhibitors need to know when they are attending our trade show. As you all know, UAE is a global business center, and even though it's a business center, I mean global business center, you need to be aware of the Arabic culture, and also you need to understand that a lot of business that happens in the Arab world, they are based on personal relationship and mutual trust. So and hospitality is a way of their living, which means that, I mean, be courteous, be, and if one of the buyers wants to take you out for lunch or dinner and would like to talk business during one of these things, then please accept their invitation. It's courteous to accept their invitation, and and it's one way they do business in Middle East. When it comes to work hours, in the UAE, the weekends are on Friday and Saturday, unlike here in US. But even then, some small private companies only close on Friday, which means that they also even work on Saturdays. When it comes to language, although Arabic is the official language, English is widely used in business transactions. I would encourage our exhibitors to, if possible, print business cards in English and also in Arabic on the other side, which makes it easier for local people. And when it comes to their brochures and marketing materials, always produce the materials in full color and have it available during the show itself so people can carry it, and it should be well made, so it looks very attractive, as well as for people to carry it easily when they're at the show and when they're walking through. Always remember the cultural factor. As I've told before, good manners and courtesy are price attributes. I mean, always, if someone invites you for a meeting, be there on time, be punctual, but also keep in mind that sometimes, even though when you're asked for a meeting, sometimes if the guest becomes a little late, it's not them being rude. Just be patient and do not take, if the buyer is a little late, do not take it as a lack of respect. Next slide, please. Some of the common mistakes that I've noticed, from our experience doing events in Dubai is that, companies underestimate the total amount of time for their ROI. They usually want exhibitors come to our show thinking that, okay, they can invest 1 year and then, and they expect to get a lot in return. But what I would recommend is patience is the key. When you come to a new market, invest at least 2 to 3 years consecutively. Go back, build relationship, make connections, and that's how you will generate more business in the Middle East market. And I've seen companies who hire experts based out in US, than working with a local business consulting firm. What I would recommend is always look out for a UAE-based business development consulting firm, because they have information about the local market, the local laws and regulations, because the laws and regulation, visa rules, everything is constantly changing. So it's always advisable to find a good consulting firm based out in UAE, talk to them, identify what you need to do, what you shouldn't do, and get all your market research done properly before even coming to Dubai. Then another thing that we have seen is people assume that free zones are by default the best option. When I say free zone, these are areas where you can incorporate your office and have full ownership. But what I've seen in the past is that a lot of exhibitors who work with local partners generate more business than companies who who try to put 100% ownership on the company. It's a good idea, but I mean, obviously, I mean, if you're new to the market, it's always advisable to work with a local partner. They have connections, they know the market very well. They know how to price your product. They know what sort of services are admissible, and how they can deliver. So it's always advisable to work with a local partner. Now, another thing that you need to keep in mind is when you choose your local partner, be very careful. If you need help in identifying your local partner, once you shortlisted 2 or 3 of partners that you're potentially wanting to work with, you can always check their credential using the U.S. commercial office in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. You can connect with them, and they can look up if these companies are legit, if you can continue to work with them, or if there are any issues. So it's always good to check with the U.S. commercial office in Abu Dhabi and Dubai before confirming, or selecting a local partner or a distributor in the region. Now, another common thing that I've seen when this VIP individuals or high-end buyers come to an exhibitor booth is that they are always interrupted by other guests or telephone conversation. But please do not think of this as a rude way of them acting towards you. It's just that you just need to be patient, be courteous, and if they're standing around by your booth wanting to talk to you, they will make sure that they continue the discussion after they've engaged in the telephone or engaged with other guests. They will always come back to you. So please don't think of this as a rude way. I mean, it's always something that you see in the business market in UAE. Next slide. I think that's about it. I'll pass it on to Susan for further slides.
Edwin, thank you so much for a whirlwind tour of the fantastic Dubai Boat Show. Looking at the time, we've got a lot of questions that have come in. And so looking at the time, I think we were over ambitious about what we could say in one webinar. I'm therefore going to sort of speed through this part and go straight on to talk about strategies. We have a lot of webinars on online tools like localized websites and social media. If this is of particular interest to you, get in touch with me and I'll direct you towards some other webinars or podcasts or infographics that might be of interest. But I'm going to skip this part and go straight on to strategies, just for to save some time. So strategies for international trade shows that we wanted to talk about very quickly before getting on to some questions. So I think the main point, and this is something you've heard both from very much from Mike, but also from Edwin, really is to try and set your goals. For us, working with clients for online tools, whether with their websites and their social media platforms, getting ready for trade shows, the setting your goals is absolutely important. It's, here I've listed some of the typical goals that clients will set out for us to say, okay, devise a strategy for us. And these are some of the key ones that we'll have. And just as Mike was talking about ROI, one of the ways of saying ROI and of measuring ROI is to sort of monitorize those goals and figure out whether you've succeeded or not in any one of those particular goals. Before the show, obviously broadcast your presence as much as possible. And we do this, use your website, use your domestic website, obviously, but even better, and this was really section 3, devise a localized website, a website that is local to the market, that responds to the local market and your prospects' demands. Know that for example, your US or UK website will not actually be visible most of the time to someone sitting outside those countries. It's if I'm not sitting in your market, then Google assumes that I don't have that much interest in your website. They assume my main interest is in the websites around me. So make sure you have a localized website that corresponds to what your searchers, what your prospects are looking for, and then broadcast your presence on that. It just allows the needle to be sticking out of the haystack. It allows prospects to find you. Obviously, the earlier you do it, the better. In fact, we suggest making it ongoing. And if there are certain trade shows where you have invested in on an annual basis, then make it a permanent feature of your website. It allows you to also claim some kind of expertise on that trade show. It shows a great depth if you can have, here's Arab Health Show 2016, 17, 18, and now 19. That makes it a very, very strong statement. Top tips for that website, for those social media, is basically make sure your marketing strategy is in place already, and then join all the relevant necessary groups, particularly things like, whether it's LinkedIn, trade associations, forums. There's lots and lots of different ones. Contact details must be very prominently displayed and frequently displayed. And then obviously any calls to action, and the best that we find is case studies or testimonials that speak out. And I would really recommend you use videos, and videos is a very effective and actually very cheap way of getting terrific social media engagement. And one final thing that people often forget about, make sure that your trade show attendance is well known within your company. You'd be surprised how much crossover there is suddenly. You'll suddenly find, Dubai Boat Show or Arab Health. Oh, in fact, we've got this has come in, or this has just happened. And that might be relevant. That might be a way of searching out for new prospects. During the show, and this is something that Mike also mentioned, getting your social media updates and postings very regular. And we would really recommend you look at different types of social networking sites, whether it's Foursquare or others. Obviously, clicking onto LinkedIn very quickly. At the end of the day, I know you're tired. Go back, click in, make sure you're networking, get engaged with your prospects. Mike mentioned, if you're 48 hours lead time to, otherwise your lead will have forgotten you. Well, social media allows you to be that reactive. It allows you to reach out and reconnect in a longer way with any prospects that you're meeting. Make your handouts real web friendly. Use QR codes. Those are something that you'll see, especially in China, but across a lot of different trade shows. But in China, for example, you can't go to a trade show without QR codes. Hashtags are great because it allows anyone who's involved in Twitter to just retweet. And then monitoring any kind of traffic and who's on your site, what's engagement are you getting, and reconnect with them. After the show, similar to what Mike was saying, follow up immediately. Personalize the follow-ups within 2 weeks. We put, but Mike said 48 hours. We would have said that you're already engaged with them on LinkedIn. Within 2 weeks, you're basically in email contact again with them. Reach out to anybody you didn't get a chance to meet after the trade show. Just boldly go and say, hi, we didn't get a chance to meet at that show, but here's a LinkedIn invitation. Here's a social media post. Here's some pictures from the show that I think you might like. Following up online is really just collecting feedback and learning from that feedback about what's going to happen for the following year. Maintaining the buzz of the trade show through blogs, social media postings, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those kind of platforms, allowing your prospects to reconnect, refine, and engage with you on the longer term. And then, as Mike also said, return on investment. We have a similar view on this. All trade shows are a huge investment and need to make sure that you're working them well and that you've optimized that investment. And for us, optimizing is also on using online tools to make sure that they are really effective. So set those goals in the beginning, monetize them. Say, well, how much, if our goal was to collect leads, how much should a lead be worth? Let's monetize it. See, did we succeed with that versus the cost of the show? And then compare those to those goals. So that's sort of a whirlwind tour of me. I really wanted to highlight what Mike and Edwin had to say about their trade shows. So for us, really, it's about online websites and social media, allowing clients and companies to really optimize and get the most out of the international trade shows through localized websites and international online media. So I've left a few minutes for questions, and I'm going to jump right in. One of the first ones we have, Mike, is about ROI, and I think this one should be for you if possible. It says, do you have a quick formula for service companies?
For what type of companies?
For service companies. I guess it's a company saying, okay, you talked about ECG machines. Do you have a quick formula for a service company to calculate the ROI?
Yeah, I think you could use the same. You could use the same formula. It's just you need to determine what your average service, um, uh, account is going to be valued at. As far as if it's a new account coming in, let's say if you're engineering, architecture, a firm, or a software developer, what would be the value on average of a new account coming into the business? I mean, it could be either a new account or it could be an existing account matured down the road. Could be a sales forecast of what could be generated when you do bring in a new account. But I would say if let's say an engineering, I'll use an engineering firm, if an engineering new account on average within the firm is bringing in, I don't know, $40,000 or $10,000 worth of revenue, then that would be the number I would use, and as in lieu of a capital good.
Thank you. And Mike, just while we have you here, another question for Arab Health. Are there specific networking events to find distributors at Arab Health?
Yeah, there is. I would definitely say that there is a U.S. Commercial Service and/or Coleman Worldwide for the U.S. exhibitors breakfast, doing business in Dubai breakfast. Those are oftentimes very good because there's a number of networking opportunities there. I actually got a chance to sit next to Sobi Badajeh, which was the Minister of Health for Saudi Arabia, who not only was the Minister of Health for Saudi Arabia, he also was the principal for IBG. I think it was called IBG Group. Don't quote me on that, but it was one of the largest hospital development companies in all of the Middle East. So he was actually there, getting ready to open up a new health center, medical center, in addition to the Dubai medical city that was being done. He was opening up another medical city, and he was actually building a couple hospitals in Egypt and some other places. So he had his own procurement group there, and I was able to meet him and ask him if he had some interest in some of our companies, and I had his procurement staff come out and meet with them, and it was so I think you just need to look at every possible networking opportunity, such as those mixers. The U.S. exhibitors reception is another good one because you'll see some various folks in there. But there's also the forums, the Congress component, and usually I think that's in Hall 5. They have the Congress where they have a lot of the physicians and companies come in and they pitch papers on the newest techniques for medical procedures and surgeries and or new equipment, and those are also very good because you'll get to meet a number of companies there. And also in that Hall 5, you'll see a lot of the UAE major distributors. For some reason, the largest of the medical distributors are located in Hall 5. They have some fairly incredible two-story pavilions. I would definitely go out and meet with them. I've done that, multiple times. Sat down with them, looked at, what they're seeking, what new products they're looking for, and then I've tried to match it with, our products. So, I think you just have to get out there and look for any and all of those kind of opportunities and explore them. And you can usually assess really pretty quickly if there's going to be any real business opportunities or not. If not, move on to the next. And it's just all trying to max it out as much as you can and get to meet as many people as you can, because you just never know. I never dreamed I'd be sitting next to the Minister of Health for Saudi Arabia at a breakfast that basically was poorly attended. I mean, there was hardly any U.S. companies there at that breakfast, and I just happened to decide to sit next to him. And turned out to be really quite a meeting.
Fantastic, great experience. I'm conscious of time. We have a lot of other questions that have come in. We will get back to you, I think, individually. I did promise that we keep for an hour, so I think that's going to be it. I'm sorry. We would ask you though to just fill out the very, very brief survey, which is after the close of this webinar. It'll help us design better quality webinars. And just really left for me to thank Edwin and Mike. Edwin Johnson from Classic Global and Mike Schiffauer from Enterprise Florida to talk about the Dubai Boat Show and Arab Health. Thank you both so much. And again, from all of our audience, I'm getting lots of sort of waves and thank yous as well. So thank you. Happy exporting, everybody. And we wish you all the best in these international trade shows. Thank you, and as I said, happy exporting. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.